Levine with your April mid-month update. These are pretty exciting times. Before I get into the actual material, I have a couple of quick announcements. Number one, this is a public video. It is not only going out to the solar level Patreon supporters. Thank you very much, Patreon supporters, for making this possible. But this is going out to everyone. It just seems like these are such intense times. The more coverage, the better. And so I am offering this to everyone. Feel free to copy it, put it on social media, whatever you'd like. That's number one. Number two, as many of you know, I will be teaching a course through Astrology Hub for the month of May. As many of you know and have participated in, I've taught a Foundations Level 1 and Level 2 of Foundations of Astrology Level 1 and Level 2. And then last year I did a chart reading extravaganza. We're taking that to the next level. And for the month of May, on Thursday afternoons, we will have live Zoom sessions. Each week we will look at two charts and we will focus on timing techniques. Timing is where the action happens in astrology. It's not only where the excitement is, but it's where the power of now, the present moment. When you look at a client or a person's chart or your own chart, yes, it's important to want to understand the nature of the chart, but it's also very significant to know what's important in the present moment and how do you weigh and judge the relative importance of timing events. We will look at timing methods such as transits, secondary progressions, solar arc directions. We'll look at a few other things also, but we'll focus on those methods. And if you are interested, we have the link down here below. It's Astrology Hub, www.astrologyhub.com/Rick Timing. And for those of you who are inner circle members at Astrology Hub or patrons in my Patreon, you have a 20% discount available to you. You'll get that discount in an email separately from this, that coupon code. So that will begin on May 5th. And in signing up and registering for the course, if you are interested, you can submit your birth data, and that gives you a chance of being one of the 8 charts. We'll use 2 per week of people in the course, and we'll use those charts as demonstration examples of how we work with timing. Okay, enough there. The other thing that I want to talk about just for a moment, which is really kind of part of timing. Astrology is extraordinary in its way that it fulfills the archetypal symbolism. We sometimes say that astrology is not specifically predictive, but it's symbolically or archetypally predictive, meaning that we know the state of the energies, but we don't necessarily know how it's going to manifest exactly. There's a wide spectrum of possibility or of potential. As many of you know, we are still and will be for the rest of this month under the influence. We'll be living under the influence, and that influence is the influence of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction that was exact on April 12th. And I'm going to give you a quick example about how sometimes astrology can surprise us with how literal the actual symbolism can be interpreted by nature. And we're talking here about Jupiter, which is the planet of the biggest, the largest. Jupiter's the largest planet in the solar system. And of course, Neptune is the god of the oceans, of the seas. And it is extremely intriguing to me that within 24 hours of the exact Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, the first in about 150 plus years in their own home signs being Jupiter and Neptune, their own home sign of Pisces, that within a day of the exact Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, the largest, that would be Jupiter, the biggest, that would be Jupiter, ship in the Russian Navy sails on the ocean, that would be Neptune, that the largest ship in the Russian Navy was bombed and sunk by a pair of Neptune missiles. The Ukrainian missiles were of a class that they called Neptune missiles. And so it's pretty damn crazy that on a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, the largest ship in the Navy is sunk by a pair of missiles that are Neptune missiles. And this is a pretty crazy example of how reality sometimes jumps to interpret or to manifest a very literal translation of an event like a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. Okay, so I am recording this on Saturday, April 16th. It will get posted sometime on the 17th, on Sunday. But I'm recording it on the day of the full moon. And this is a very intriguing full moon. And I'm going to shift here to a view of the chart. And we have in front of us the chart for, actually, it is noon today, noon on Saturday. The actual full moon itself was 5 minutes before noon, 11:55 in that Pacific Daylight Time. All times that I'll give here are Pacific Daylight Time, and all charts that I give here will be Aries rising with a natural house system, meaning that we really do not have a horizon, we do not have an ascendant or a midheaven, because that changes depending upon our location. And although I'm here in Redmond, Washington, you guys are all over the United States, in fact all over the globe. So from that standpoint, the times here will be accurate, the planetary positions and aspects will be accurate, but you'll have to run a chart locally to get your house positions if you're so interested. So the full moon is quite a powerful full moon today. And although by the time you watch this, this will already be a day in the past, but remember, the lunations hold typically for at least a couple of weeks, and this lunation, this full moon, will hold all the way until the Taurus new moon, which is an eclipse, and that will be on April 30th, and we will get to that. We will end up actually with that. Today's full moon, however, is a significant full moon. First of all, the full moon in Libra is always a significant full moon because it's really the first full moon of the astrological year. This one's happening a bit late, which is why both Passover and Easter are late this year, because Passover and Easter are both tied to the first full moon after the spring equinox, Easter being the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring vernal equinox. That's, of course, in the northern hemisphere. But we have this full moon occurring at 26 degrees, and the significant thing about this is that Pluto is actually square both sides of that opposition. In other words, we have a T-square with the sun and the moon opposite each other, with Pluto square both sides. Now, the intriguing thing about the Libra full moon is that Libra is the sign of opposites, and Aries is the sign of self. And so, in a way, the Libra full moon is kind of like the... It's kind of like the... I don't know how to say it. It's the primal, it's the basic full moon, because the sun in Aries is I, me, mine, self. And the moon in Libra is reflecting that, creating the polarity between self and other. The polarity between self and other makes relationships, oppositions in a natal chart usually are expressed through relationships. But the point here is that this full moon is a relationship-oriented full moon with Pluto squaring the sun and the moon, and Pluto has to do with undercurrents, with secret, with hidden power. Pluto is certainly about transformation and evolution. These are just keywords, but often when Pluto is square a moon or square the sun, in this case both, we know that there's stuff going on beneath the surface that has to do with how those events are unfolding, and we might want to take on larger power structures only to find out they were way more powerful than we thought. And so here we're looking at at a setup here where there's some incredibly powerful forces at play. One can see them in many places in our lives, whether it be in personal relationships, job-related events, or whether we're looking at the Ukrainian-Russian war. There are so many places where we see the intensity of this playing out, in politics all over the globe, for that matter. And so we can see this as being a pretty intense start to the second half of the month of April. The other thing, though, that's of interest here to me is that Venus and Mars, which have been traveling together for quite a while now, are now separating because Venus is moving faster than Mars, and that when we look at Mars having just moved into Pisces and Saturn back at 23 degrees of Aquarius, we can see that Saturn is trine the full moon by about 3 degrees or so, and Mars is trine the full moon also, but more like by about 5 degrees. And if we look at the halfway point between Saturn and Mars, that halfway point, basically it would be from 23 degrees of Aquarius to 1 degree of Pisces is so 8 degrees. And so half of that is 4 degrees, which means that the midpoint, the halfway point between Saturn and Mars, is about 27 degrees of Aquarius, which is very closely trine the sun, trine the moon, and sextile the sun. This tells us that behind the apparent power plays, power struggles, things that are going on that are not easy to deal with, the tough issues, behind that, we actually have some integrity that is acting out in a way that can really stabilize things over the long run. This is a tough full moon, but I think that it's easy to gloss over the importance of Saturn, structure, Mars, war, amongst other things, but how that Saturn and Mars working together actually takes the pressure off both the sun and the moon. Obviously, also, although we're 4 days now after the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, they're still partile conjunction. They're still partile conjunct. And they stay pretty close together for the rest of the month. In fact, it won't be until Jupiter moves into Aries in May, and until after both Venus and Mars sweep across Neptune and Jupiter, that we'll be done with this kind of high-level, spacey imagination, hope, potential, expansion, too much fantasy, delusion. I mean, there's a lot of focus on this Jupiter-Neptune being just all wonderful and magical, and all we need to do is focus on it and think about all the great things that can happen. And I don't want to take anything away from that, but everything has a shadow. And part of the shadow of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is the idea that we can make something that is not very healthy sound healthy, or something that is pretty evil sound okay. We can turn something, we can be Pollyannas. We can turn something that is not okay into something that, oh, look at this, isn't it wonderful? And blind optimism is not something that's going to help us here. So this is really, really significant and important. As we move the chart ahead here, a day at a time, we're going to see that, and again, I'm going to refer to today as whatever the day is on the chart. So right now, today is the day of the full moon, actually the day I'm recording this, and that is Saturday, April 16. Later in the afternoon today, actually at 5:22 p.m., the moon moves from Libra into Scorpio, and that intensifies energies. It sets up, I think, a tough beginning of the week. And as we move the chart ahead a day to Sunday, April 17th, we have a couple of things occur that I think are significant. First of all, early in the morning, we have Mars forming a quintile with Uranus. I sometimes don't put a lot of emphasis on the what some people like to call the minor aspects. I like to call them the harmonic aspects. But quintiles are creative, and they can also be difficult. They can be cruel. Quintiles, though, have to do with charisma. They have to do with the expression of energy. And whenever an aspect connects Mars and Uranus, we know that there is some physical, Mars, energy that's being released suddenly and unexpectedly. That would be Uranus. And that is on Sunday morning, but will stick with us pretty much throughout the weekend. The other thing is that by Sunday evening, Mercury forms a sextile with Venus. Now, Venus is actually kind of an interesting position today because Mercury forms a sextile with Venus, and in fact that Venus is also coming into a sextile with Uranus. That's not exact until either very late on Sunday night. In most places it won't be until Monday morning, early, that Venus sextiles Uranus. But look at that Mercury coming into a conjunction with Uranus, which is exact on this evening, Sunday evening. Now, Mercury-Uranus together is high-frequency communication. It's electric. It's a lot of information being downloaded, not all of which is sensible, not all of which is useful, but we have that high-frequency brilliance of the Uranus-Mercury, Uranus being the higher octave of Mercury. This is a very powerful and intense conjunction, which is very interesting because it also is being trined by the moon, Venus being trined by the moon. We can see here on Sunday the moon in Scorpio opposite Mercury and Uranus, and that moon in Scorpio trine Venus, which in turn is sextile to the Mercury-Uranus. What does this mean? This means that although our feelings, the moon, although what we need, the moon, might be very, very specific and pointed, the Mercury-Uranus can surprise us and kind of create situations out of the blue, or giving us ideas of things that are very different than the way we normally do them. And with Venus so supportive in all of this, that Venus can actually, and Venus is exalted. Venus is in the sign she likes to be in, better than any other sign in the zodiac, unless she's in a home sign of Taurus or Libra. But that Venus is really magical and can take that pressure off of the craziness, the suddenness, the unexpectedness of the moon opposing Mercury and Uranus. And also in this, look at Chiron, because Chiron is at 13 Aries, Venus is at 13 Pisces, Mercury is at 13 Taurus, Uranus is at 13 Taurus, and so we have Chiron at that halfway point, at the semi-sextile point between Venus and the Mercury-Uranus conjunction. And what that indicates is that semisextiles are not all that easy. They can be complicated. They can be like quincunxes. They can be things out of whack a bit, like we can't quite make it right. And so that Chiron becomes a little bit of a standout and can in fact become a bit of a problem. And so I think it's important that we cut others some slack, that we're willing to and able to understand that forgiveness is not about letting someone off the hook. Forgiveness is actually about allowing things to be in the past so we can create what's new in the future. Forgiveness is not necessarily forgetting. It's compassion. And I think compassion is one of the significant words for the whole second part of April, because we have 4 planets now that Mars has moved into Pisces. We have Mars and Venus and Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces. And before the month is out, that moon will come all the way around and join those planets in Pisces. We'll have 5 planets in Pisces. And the higher expression of this Pisces energy is, in fact, compassion. And that compassion becomes very significant when, in a few days, the sun moves into Taurus. Because when the sun moves into Taurus, that'll be on Tuesday, we'll then have a handful of planets in Pisces, and we'll have 3 planets and the North Node in Taurus. And Pisces and Taurus by sign are sextile one another. And so these energies are actually working together, and we might see some definite improvements in a variety of situations as we have those signs being emphasized. That is the 17th. We move to April 18th. And on the 18th, that's the exact Venus-Uranus sextile. But remember, that's just continuing the energy from yesterday's Mercury-Venus sextile. But we also have today kind of an after effect of the full moon. Remember, the full moon was square to Pluto, because within a few hours after the full moon, the moon actually made it square to Pluto. But because the sun is moving so much slower than the moon, it actually took 3 days for the sun to reach the exact degree where it squares Pluto. So this energy is a continuation of Saturday's full moon. But now we're talking about the dynamic stress between this idea of being where we are, being in the present moment. The sun in Aries is be here now. It can be related to antagonism or aggression or conflict, but it's mostly because with that sun in Aries this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what's going on in the moment. And that is square to Pluto, which says, yeah, well, there's some power pulling in a different way. And so we really have some deep stuff to work out here. And the significant thing, I think, with most Pluto squares is to avoid, this is going to sound like a double negative, is to avoid letting them go into denial. In other words, bringing whatever the hidden stresses and tensions are, to keep them in our awareness, to bring them to the surface, because even if they're difficult, they're easier to deal with when we're dealing with them than it is if we're not dealing with them and we're repressing them or suppressing them or denying them or avoiding them, and they'll come back and get us even stronger later down the road. So, and I said also that when the moon moved into Scorpio, that's setting up a little bit more of a difficult energy, because the moon moves into Scorpio, Pluto being the modern ruling planet of Scorpio, and the sun from Mars's sign, Aries, squaring Pluto, and that certainly can be some increased conflict. Not that we don't already have enough conflict going on. And even as of Saturday, April 16th, we've already seen a number of issues of violence and of things happening that are even more so than usual, as if that is even a possibility, but it appears that it is. Also on on Monday, the moon slips into Sagittarius at 7:16 p.m. And this now sets the tone for a few days that are maybe lighter in energy. We actually can feel as if things are lightening up. Things are perhaps a bit easier. And so the moon moves into Sagittarius on Monday night, and by Tuesday, we have the moon doing a couple of very interesting things. Very early in the morning, like right away, like at just 12:30 a.m., the moon squares Mars. Because the moon, having just moved into Sagittarius, when it hits 3 degrees of Sagittarius, it will square Mars at 3 degrees of Pisces. Again, here we're seeing fighting words. Now, if you're asleep, it might be just a night of restless sleep. It might be a dream that has some aggression or violence in it. Or even just remember, Mars is not just negative aggression. It's also the ability to stand up for ourselves and to state our position. But when the moon squares Mars, it's often a conflict between what we need, the moon, and what we're actually heading toward, Mars. The significant thing, though, I think about Tuesday is the fact that by Tuesday evening, Mercury is forming a septile. Septiles are complicated. They are 1/7 of a circle. They don't fit into the zodiac, and I know many astrologers don't use these more modern aspects, but they work. And septiles can be otherworldly. They're complicated. Septiles are alien. They don't fit into this realm, and you see strong septile aspects in charts of aliens like David Bowie. I mean, he was not of this world. He was here, but when you see septiles, a predominance of them, you know that there's stuff going on it's not like Pluto stuff that's just unconscious. It's stuff that is kind of leaking through some sort of filter from other times, other places, other realities, other dimensions, and like I say, it's often complicated. Normally, I wouldn't talk about just a single transiting septile, except this Mercury septile Jupiter is more significant because the moon, as it moves through the day, is also going to form a triseptile, that's 3 septiles, to Mercury, and a biseptile, that's 2 septiles to Jupiter. And so we have that moon forming an effect with Mercury and Jupiter. We have the moon, Mercury, and Jupiter forming 3 points on a 7-pointed star, which is like a configuration, like a grand trine or a T-square. It's a symmetry and or a pattern with a multiple of planets. And then to complicate things even more, we have to note that throughout the day, the moon makes 5 separate septile series aspects. And so I see Tuesday as a day where things can be rather complicated, hard to put our finger on. I think of Dylan's song, A Simple Twist of Fate. That is a perfect septile energy. And what's intriguing about that is that on Tuesday, things get simpler. Now, I know that sounds like a contradiction in terms, but they get complicated and are more complicated all day with that septile energy. And then at 7:24 p.m., the sun moves from Aries into Taurus, and this begins the month of Taurus and can really settle the energy down. I think this is really significant. In Taurus, we have a sense of determination. In Taurus, it's a practical, fixed earth sign. It's of the senses. What we see is what we get. Things are more apparent. It's like we want to get back to basics. And I find it intriguing. I'm going to move this chart ahead another day so that we can actually see the sun that is now in Taurus. But we now can see that we have the sun, Uranus, and Mercury in Taurus and the North Node. And we have Mars, Venus, Neptune, and Jupiter in Pisces. And I would call this chart that lingers with us for a lot of the rest of the month, but certainly for several days now, is a chart of determined compassion. Remember, Taurus is determined. Taurus is the cows coming back to the barn to be milked. Nothing's nothing's going to stop them. They are determined. It's plodding, not plotting. I always find it interesting that the opposition between Taurus and Scorpio is the opposition between plod and plot. Plot is scheming. There's all kinds of complications and things that are not being said and undercurrents and so on. And plotting is just like, that's where I'm going and that's where I'm going to get to and nothing's going to stop me and I'm going to keep going in that direction until I get there. So this idea of determination in Taurus is very significant, and because there's 4 planets in Pisces, if we're going to be determined about something, let's be determined about being compassionate, about understanding that we are all one, that the illusion of separateness is in fact a grand illusion, but that we need to up the ante here in life in general on the planet, and if we are going to survive as a species, we need to sooner or later acknowledge that we are living on an island, this island Earth. And as such, we are not separate from one another. That pain in one part of the world, whether it be Yemen or Ukraine, is felt everywhere by everyone on some level. And so we have this opportunity for this determined compassion. But we also have the flip side of that, and that is compassionate determination. And what's the difference? Well, the determination part is this part of us that knows where we're going. It's the part of each of us that knows this is true. This is true, not that. And yet we meet someone who goes, no, that's true, not this. And this is part of the confusing problem that we are in right now, is that there are so many issues. I mean, I've listed these before. I don't need to list them again. There are so many issues where we are absolutely bifurcated on, where there are people who go, this is true, and that's just stupid. And then you have just as many people, or not as many people, going, no, this is true, and that's just stupid. Or this is the way it is, and anyone who believes that or thinks that is not an American, is not a human, it does not have love of their country, whether their country is Great Britain, Russia, or Ukraine. It doesn't matter. The point here is that the difference between determined compassion, which is that we are going to be compassionate no matter what, and the compassionate determination, the other side of that means that even though we are determined, we have to be understanding of the fact that we are looking at one side of a coin. And that there are always 2 or more sides, and it doesn't mean that one side can't be correct. But it also doesn't mean that only one side is right. In other words, we tend to look at things in states of extremism, which we have been in as a culture for a while on the planet, humanity has. We tend to look at things as black and white. And I think that part of the magic of the emphasis on Taurus and Pisces is this ability to see hundreds of shades of gray in between the black and white, and to begin to work toward finding common goals, if not common starting points. So enough there for now, but I'm looking forward to, I can't say I'm excited by, but it's a first positive streak I've seen in a while of potential astrologically, where we have some strong astrological signature, including the Jupiter-Neptune, which is still functioning, and of course the Venus coming into that day by day, and then Mars, and that kind of meeting up with the determined Taurus energy of the imagine we are one. So that is April 20th. Also on April 20th, by later in the day, actually 8:52 p.m., the moon moves into Capricorn. Again, now things get a little bit more serious again. And when the moon is in Capricorn, however, it's going to, as it moves through Capricorn, it's going to sextile the 4 planets in Pisces, and it's going to trine the 3 planets in the North Node in Taurus. So normally we think of the moon in Capricorn as being a difficult position because the moon is emotional and fluid and feeling and changeable, and Capricorn is more calculating and wants to hold the position and to, and wants to master reality rather than flowing with an emotion. However, I think we will see that as the moon moves through Capricorn, that this can actually be a smoother couple of days. So let's move to Thursday the 21st. And on Thursday the 21st, the moon does make its sextile with Mars and trine to Uranus. They're both early enough degrees. Now let's see, it also makes that trine to the sun, but it does that late on Wednesday night. So it makes that sweep starting to trine the sun Sunday night, then it's Mars, and then by the end of the day it's trining Uranus, and then tomorrow on the 22nd it will sextile Venus, trine Mercury, trine the nodal axis, or the North Node, sextile Neptune and sextile Pluto, and all of this sounds really good for Thursday and on into Friday. However, by the end of Friday, the moon has one last little errand it needs to run while it's in Capricorn, and that's a short meeting with the big guy. Well, the little guy who's holding all the strings, and that is powerful, potent Pluto. And that little Moon-Pluto meeting takes place at 8:52 p.m. on Friday the 22nd, but that is an important event, and it's kind of a different flavor than how easy everything was up until that point, at least through those couple of days. That is Friday. On Saturday the 23rd, we have now, as the moon moves into Aquarius, and it actually does that at 11:17 on Friday night, 11:17 p.m. So at the very end of Friday night, that moon moves, after it meets up with Pluto, it moves into Aquarius. And once that moon is in Aquarius as a fixed sign, now as it runs through Aquarius, that moon is going to square the sun, square Uranus, square Mercury, and square the nodal axis. And all of that's a little bit tougher. In fact, it'll also conjoin Saturn. It joins up with Saturn on Sunday the 24th. But it's already kind of going into tougher territory on Saturday when it even at the beginning of the day, when it squares the sun. The moon in fixed Aquarius squares the sun. This is a third quarter square. Crisis of consciousness, says Dane Rudhyar. It's about leaving something behind, but it's typically not something physical here. It's an idea, it's a concept. We're actually moving toward the dark of the moon, but we're also moving closer and closer to those 5 planets being in Pisces once the moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces. So that is the 23rd. Also on the 23rd, we have Mercury lining up with the nodal axis. And what makes this even more intriguing is we're at a point where Saturn is also squaring the nodes. And, that squaring the point, that square point to the nodes, is called the bending. the bendings on either side. And in evolutionary astrology, that point is actually known as a skip step. It's almost like when a planet hits that point, there's remedial work to do that's been left over from earlier in our life, from previous lives, from other times, other places, family history, whatever. And this is interesting because we have Mercury joining the nodes, talking about communication. This is about sending and receiving of information, and yet it's squaring Saturn. And although that Mercury square Saturn is exact, not until Sunday. I'm going to move the chart ahead now to Sunday, and we can see that Mercury at 24 degrees is just past the Saturn at 2354 degrees. So that Mercury square Saturn occurs on Sunday morning, and this is about telling the truth whether we want to or not. This is about reevaluating what we think we know. This is about having our facts being checked and having to confront those things which we might have wrong, or using our ability to garner facts and helping someone else see a truth where they may not. Now, we do have a problem here in general because with the Neptune in Pisces for years already, and now Jupiter conjoining Neptune in Pisces, there's a little problem that sometimes facts can be interpreted or even perceived very differently. We've seen this again and again and again in the past couple of years in politics and medicine, current events all over the place, where something happens and people see it this way or that way. And so, unfortunately, when we have this Mercury node being squared by Saturn, we may have some really serious work to do, whether we want to do it or not, about getting to the bottom of truth. This is about truth, I think, prevailing after it is called out. Of course, nothing's completely clean in astrology, and what I mean by that is that while we're getting that Mercury squaring Saturn reality check, we're also getting Mercury trining Neptune. Sextiling Neptune. It's sextiling Neptune today, and it sextiles Neptune on Tuesday, the 26th. And so on one hand, we're getting a reality check of this is the way it has to be. And on the other hand, there's still some slipperiness, some confusion. Someone's being deluded or confused or misled. And so even with that Mercury square Saturn, Saturn squaring Mercury, and the nodes for that matter, we're still not quite getting to the bottom of it yet. The 25th, we have the moon moving into Pisces. And here we can see there's now 5 planets in Pisces, counting the sun and moon as planets, and 3 planets in the nodal axis, North Node in Taurus. And this is what I was alluding to or talking about earlier. The moon moving into Pisces actually creates a sextile with the sun, closing sextile. This is supportive, this is cooperative, this is setting the tone for the next few days with so many planets in Pisces and in Taurus, these planets potentially working together. Even that Mercury having just sextiled Neptune, coming into sextiling Jupiter tomorrow on the 26th. This is, I think, a smoother period of time. We do have that moon, though, as it moves through Pisces, it will go bing, 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 bing. Well, it won't go bing, bing. I go bing, bing, bing. The moon will actually line up with, it will conjoin Mars, fiery, assertive, Venus, sweet, tender, Neptune, spiritual or confused, Jupiter, make something more than it really is. And so we're going to see some real energy in that Pisces realm as the moon moves through it and not only lines up with each of the planets in Pisces, but at the same time also creates those sextiles with not only the sun early this morning, Monday morning, but also then with Uranus and Mercury later today and tomorrow. That is the 25th. By the 26th, we already talked about how Mercury now is creating the sextile with Jupiter. That happens later in the afternoon, actually already in the evening. So it looks like here Mercury is only 2641 and Jupiter is at 27, but that Mercury will catch up to that 27 degree point later in the day, form that exact sextile, and someone can come in with a big idea. Someone can bring in an opportunity. Something can happen here that shows us a potential where we didn't see a potential before. And of course, the moon is still running through Pisces, lining up with Venus by late evening, 9:49, lining up with Neptune at 11 o'clock Tuesday evening, night, lining up with Jupiter at 4 a.m. On the 27th. Let's go there. And then on the 27th by 9 a.m., after the moon makes not only its conjunction with Jupiter, but also its sextiles with Mercury and Pluto too. So it gets Mercury on one side and Pluto, and we can see what this is showing is that Mercury is coming into a trine with Pluto. That Mercury trine to Pluto is exact on Thursday the 28th. But even on Wednesday, the 27th, as that moon is making the sextile to Mercury on one side and then to Pluto, it's already deepening the energy of the equation. It's intensifying things. Things are getting ready to change. Yes, it's a trine, and trine meaning between the Mercury and the Pluto. And trines often hold the status quo. They hold the energy the way it is. However, as that moon makes opportunistic sextiles to both the Pluto and the Mercury, I'm expecting that we can see some changes in the air. We may not know where they're leading yet, but we can see that they are going to take us somewhere. That would be on the 27th. Also on the 27th, we get Venus catching up with Neptune. They're both at 24 degrees of Pisces. Venus and Neptune together is another layer of confusion, of romance. Venus-Neptune can be exquisitely beautiful, but sometimes exquisitely beautiful things can also be exquisitely delusional or can mislead us. We can be very attracted and fall in love with a person, a place, an idea, anything, to only realize that it's not quite as beautiful as we thought. Having been a long-time scuba diver, I'm always reminded that you can be down at about 40 or 50 feet beneath the surface, where the light is already filtered and some of the colors are getting a little bit less intense, and you can see something on the bottom and pick it up and look at it and go, wow, this is like so cool. And it may be a rock or a shell or something, and you stick it in your dive bag or your pocket or in your swim trunks or wetsuit or whatever, and because it's just gorgeous, and you want to show it to people when you get back up to the surface. And you get back up to the surface and you take it out and go, wait, look, guys, look what I found. And you take it out and it's just gray and ugly, and there's just like nothing to it at all. This is often how that Venus-Neptune works. Remember, Neptune exists in the realm of imagination. Neptune is spirit. It's spiritual. It's alcohol, because alcohols are spirits. Spirits have no substance. They dissolve into the air. Spirit. And Neptune is that elusive spirit energy. And Venus, on the other hand, is physical. Venus actually has substance. Venus is the sweetness of taste or of touch. It's the sensation of pleasure. It's real. Venus and Taurus, earth. Venus, real, sensible. Venus in Libra, something that's beautiful in our mind. Libra is an air sign. Those are two Libras. Those are Venus's two home signs. So when we have Venus lining up with Neptune, we can actually become totally enamored with something as the two of them are combined. And yet, as that Venus begins to separate from Neptune, of course, it's going to conjunct Jupiter first, and that occurs on Saturday the 30th. But as that Venus moves into Aries in May, what's going to happen is that we might be left saying, oh my God, that thing that I thought was so valuable, that person that I thought was so beautiful, it wasn't what I thought I was seeing at all. Because when a planet lines up with Neptune, we often think of Mercury as the trickster. Well, Neptune is the real trickster, because Neptune can show up one way and actually be something very different. It's the initial belief that Neptune was not a good planet because it was the planet of delusion. It was the planet of confusion. And it is both of those things, but it's both of those things because it makes us aware of the fact that I am not separate from you. That's a great illusion that works. It works because it's my ego that keeps me going. But when you look at things from a spiritual standpoint, it becomes obvious, especially with Jupiter and Neptune and Venus and Mars, and recently, previously, the moon too, all in Pisces. It reminds us that Pisces is the ocean. It's the seas of consciousness that flow through all of us. Remember, it's not like we're so tiny and the universe is so large. Our imaginations, our consciousness is so large, it can contain the entire universe. But this is the trick and the illusion of that Venus lined up with Pisces. So we might find ourselves on Wednesday the 27th, when Venus and Neptune actually align. The moon moves into Aries. Something's exciting. This is it. Things are cool. Only to be disillusioned, or that is to realize that our illusions were illusions and not real, within a few days. That is on Wednesday. Oh, and also that's the day that Mercury forms its exact trine with Pluto, which is basically the capability of going deeper. Not only the capability, it's the natural, things naturally run deeper. Water will run deeper. Feelings will run deeper. Things have more intensity, but they're not necessarily difficult. They're just more powerful. Transformations can be even more magical and more complete, but again, because it's a trine, it doesn't have to be difficult. That is on the 27th. 28th is the exact trine in the morning. Let me move that ahead. That's the exact Mercury Pluto trine. We can see now Venus having passed Neptune and heading toward Jupiter. We're still on Thursday the 28th, and we also have the moon, as it's moving through Aries, will make a conjunction with Chiron. This isn't necessarily long lasting, and it happens mid-morning. The actual conjunction is at 10:51 a.m. Pacific time, but this may be a moment of vulnerability, or a moment where we can actually get close to someone if we're willing to reveal our own weakness as part of a communication. Remember, showing one's vulnerability or one's weakness can be the ultimate sign of strength. We may have had that backwards for too long. That is Thursday the 28th. Another thing that I want to point out here is that Pluto has barely moved all month. If we were to go back to the actual very, very beginning of the month, the first day of April, on the first day of April, Pluto was at 28 degrees and 24 minutes. 28 degrees and 24 minutes. Pluto has been slowing down to go retrograde, and by the last day or last couple of days of April, Pluto actually technically makes its retrograde turn technically on Friday midday on April 29th, technically. But look at Pluto. It's still a month later. It's still almost in the same place as it was at the beginning of the month. It's not even a half a degree moved. And so Pluto has been incredibly strong all month, which is why the aspects to Pluto, the moon's conjunction with Pluto we talked about earlier, the sun square to Pluto and the full moon square Pluto, the Mercury trine Pluto, these are all more intense than normal because when a planet moves slower, it holds more power. And even slow-moving Pluto, as it changes directions, as it turns retrograde, and also make a note that Pluto's turning retrograde is the first of... We've been in a phase where all the traditional planets, all the planets, including Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, have all been moving direct for a few months. And Pluto is the first planet that gets far enough away from the sun as a planet approaches in opposition to the sun, the outer planets, that's when they go retrograde. So we see Pluto farther away from the sun than any of the other planets. Pluto turns retrograde on the 29th. And then in the months ahead, we will see Saturn turn retrograde, and we will see Neptune turn retrograde, Jupiter turn retrograde, and all the outer planets, then Chiron, they will one by one turn retrograde. Again, what this really means is that Pluto is a more important player now than it seems like it should be, even though it's a significant player because it's the only planet left in Capricorn. And between now and 2023, when Pluto tips into Aquarius, Pluto has some real work to do, and that's to finish up the deconstruction of all of those social systems that need deconstructing in order to be reconstructed and evolved. So Pluto is still quite significant and in the picture, and its stationary point here is also very significant, and also because this, as we've talked about here earlier, I mean, we're talking about the tropical Pluto return in the United States chart. And so there's this whole sense of the evolutionary process of the United States itself, that metamorphosis that occurs from death to rebirth, from caterpillar to, hopefully, butterfly. That is on the 29th. On the 29th, we also have the sun making a half square with Neptune. This can be a bit confusing because Neptune is confusing. In fact, that sun is coming through half squares with Neptune, with Venus, with Jupiter. And so there's a little bit of a stressful energy here between the Taurus and Pisces energy. But the other thing on the 29th is that we have Mercury changing signs. We can see here at noon on the 29th, Mercury is at 29 degrees 52 minutes. We also have the moon changing signs. The moon is at 27 Aries, 12 minutes. For the last couple of days, that moon in Aries has been pushing us into new territory. This is both exciting and frightening because we've never been here before again. Meanwhile, with all those planets in Taurus, that's the stabilization occurring. And if we move this ahead a day, we can see that Mercury moved into Gemini and that the moon, as it moves towards the new moon, moves into Taurus. The moon actually, Mercury moves into Gemini on Friday afternoon at 3:23 p.m., and the moon moves into Taurus at 5:18 p.m. That's yesterday, Friday. Now today, the chart here that we're looking at is for April 30th. And on April 30th, we have a very significant event, and one that will set the tone, maybe not only for the next month, or for the next month, but maybe for the next months it's probably already been in play. And what we're talking about is the new moon in Taurus, but this is a new moon solar eclipse. And this solar eclipse occurs at 1:28 p.m. And it occurs at 10 degrees 28 minutes of Taurus. And this should be stable because it's a Taurus new moon. This should be find your most significant, simple, reliable seeds, the ones that you can plant and you know they're going to grow, you know how they're going to grow, because Taurus wants cause and effect. And so with the new moon eclipse in Taurus, we'd think that we want to go reliable. The problem is that this new moon eclipse is conjunct Uranus. It's 4 degrees from being exact, but that means within 8 hours of the eclipse, the moon will already be aligned with Uranus, and the sun will catch up with Uranus, I think, by May 3rd, I think is the... But it'll take 3 or 4 days for the moon, or for the sun to catch up with Uranus. This is hugely dynamic, but what's mostly dynamic is that this eclipse indicates a very fundamental change, and because it's a Uranian eclipse, it's bringing us into the future. There's unexpected energies wrapped around it, and the saving grace, which I'm going to say in a minute why it may not be a saving grace, but the saving grace is the conjunction of the greater and lesser benefic, Jupiter being the greater benefic, the big guy, the cosmic big guy, and Venus the lesser benefic, the beautiful and the pleasurable. And when Venus and Jupiter come together, it's often a very powerfully sweet and or bountiful experience. However, too much of a good thing isn't a good thing. And so here we can be talking about something that may end up being an idea or something that's taken too far, that sounds like it'll be good on paper, but maybe turns out to be too much and backfires. This new moon is also sextile Mars. And I think that's significant. We definitely have some smoothness in this energy, but we also have this new moon forming a half square, a semi-square to Venus and Jupiter, which again is like a struggle between knowing what we need to do to keep it simple, to be determined, to keep it on track, and this idea of how things could work out for the better, for the good, that these two things are not aligning quite in the way that we want. This is the first of 2 eclipses. We'll talk about the Scorpio full moon eclipse next month. This brings us up to date. I hope this makes sense to you guys. I hope you enjoy this. If you like what we're doing here, hit subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram at Rick Levine Astrologer at Instagram or on Facebook. And of course, your support is always appreciated on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rick Levine. And my sincere thanks to all of you who support this work, getting the word about real astrology out to a larger number of people. This is important and hopefully can help us get through this difficult point on the planet. That's it for now. Think cosmically, act locally. I'm Rick Levine.